Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the Capes and Lunatics. We've got another big one for you. It's me and Charlie. Lilith will be back next week, but we have special guest. You know him from many of his Marvel works and more, which we'll get to. Mr. Jim Zub. How are you,
Hey,
sir?
thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Busting away as always. How are you guys? How are things?
Oh, good. Good.
Awesome. Good.
Charlie? All right. So I guess we should we jump into Thunderbolts first?
Let's do it. Yeah. I'm writing the new Thunderbolt series at Marvel that launched in August. Issue 2 just came out, and we are having an absolute blast on it. It has been a real joy to work on. It's also kind of an interesting return to form because kind of my first major Marvel project, I guess Marvel superhero project, would have been Thunderbolts back in like 2015, 2016. So it's also kind of a nice return to form as well for that.
So this one has been in this planning state. Has it been in the planning stages for a while? Because it seems like there were rumblings of this,
Oh yeah, we were
couple
supposed to launch
frames.
in May, and then there was delays that happened. Sean Isaac, our artist, he had some health issues, and so rather than trying to split individual stuff as much, we pushed back the initial launch, and it worked fine anyways. There were other things that, like, they ended up adding that Devil's Reign Omega and a couple other things into the mix to sort of bridge the gap. But yeah, it's been in, feels like it's been in the works for a while, because it has been, and really pumped to finally have it out there into the world.
So that's an interesting question. When they insert something
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't originally intended to be in that spot, but they say, you know what, we need to move the blocks around to
Right.
make it work in the Tetris
That's
system.
right. Yeah.
Does that cause problems for you? Does it cause problems for them?
I mean,
Like,
it just
are you
depends
apologetic?
on.
Like, man, I'm sorry that you have to like fit this here when we were going to do this there.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be flexible with these things. It's a gigantic shared universe, and there's so many different moving parts. Like a couple of years back when the pandemic first started, that was right as Marvel was in the midst of production on an event called Empire, and a whole bunch of schedule stuff moved in and around that. And I was working on a miniseries that got canceled midway through. Other stuff I was working on got put on pause. Like, everyone had to be flexible about it. Working in this business is, you're a freelancer, and so you're constantly having to sort of, the goalposts get moved sometimes. You got to be fast on your feet and able to kind of keep up. It's not always ideal, of course. Sometimes it works in your favor. In this case, I do think that the Thunderbolts book kind of benefited from it, because it was going to launch in May, and there was some murmurs that there might be a Thunderbolts, sort of Marvel cinematic thing going on, and then it all got announced before our book came out. So I think we kind of benefit from that extra bit of name brand recognition that comes out there. People now, are going to hear more and more about the Thunderbolts in the coming, months and years, in the build up to the MCU kind of version. And so, there's a benefit there for us as the creative team that we weren't anticipating. And now we kind of, get to ride a little bit more of that wave. So it's, sometimes it gives and sometimes it takes away. Yeah.
So within that concept,
Mm-hmm.
and just to give the give and take. Now you have mentioned John Walker
Right.
already in your books, and we know that John Walker is going to be one of the MCU Thunderbolts.
Right.
So is there anyone saying, yeah? So how are we going to handle the John Walker story within your
Well, John
context?
Walker is not a main character in our miniseries, so he appears in that first issue, and that's his only kind of appearance in this first kind of story. So he's there, but he's not like a major player in it. What happens
Okay.
later on, where things go from there, that's all, to be determined. And so now that there's an actual kind of Thunderbolts movie cast, announced, I think it's easier to do future planning in that regard and see how it all kind of comes together. And the nice thing is that the comic universe is not absolutely beholden to the movie stuff. Like, we are. The way that it was described to me one time is, we're the sharp end, the front tip of the spear. Like, we're out there creating new stories, we're creating new characters, we're creating new situations that hopefully becomes interesting enough and useful enough that it also gets adapted later on by the Marvel Cinematic Universe or by the TV shows or whatever. But our job has got to be to tell really good comic stories first and foremost, you know, and that was my goal coming into it. Like, I'm building off of what's in that Devil's Reign event. I'm building off of the kind of planning that I did with, you know, CB Cebulski and Tom Brevoort, my editors, you know, at Marvel, more than I'm worried about like what is going to happen in 2025 with the Thunderbolts movie, you know, things like that. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
So was this whole was the whole lineup like? Did you get carte blanche on the lineup, or were there certain notes like certain people had to be here? Like, I mean, did Hawkeye have to be here? Did Monica
right? It was my idea actually to make Hawkeye the leader of this thing, and kind of the whole concept sort of spun out of the question of, okay, in post Devil's Reign, you know, what is there somewhere for a team to kind of form? Is there some sort of a reason to pull this stuff all together? And that idea of, you know, for your listeners who may not have read Devil's Reign, you know, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, is the mayor of New York City. He's corrupt and doing all these terrible things. And one of the things he did was he outlawed, you know, costume vigilantism. Not that that's not illegal anyways, but like explicitly, you know, outlawed costumed heroes, except for he deputized this group of, you know, superpowered individuals called the Thunderbolts that were acting as his sort of deputies and backing up the cops to arrest superheroes and things like that. And then what we posited was, look, you can't just take that off the books as instantly. It's not as easy to get a law removed, you know, as something to get started. And so when Luke Cage becomes mayor of the city, he looks and goes, oh man, we've still got these heroes are outlawed. Technically, we don't have to enforce it very heavily, but it's still out there as a problem and something we have to deal with. And it's also surprisingly popular with the general public because, you know, they're a little freaked out by all these costume crazies running around. And we have on the books that the Thunderbolts are, you know, New York's superhero team, and they are legit. Well, we don't want to have the same criminal team running around, but we still have the name and we still have the positions. So let's take that concept. You know, Luke Cage had led the Thunderbolts before, and so did Hawkeye. Hawkeye was the leader of the Thunderbolts post Baron Zemo back in the 90s. And so the idea was, look, both these guys have got skin in the game. They want to reform the name and kind of use it for something good. So Luke pulls together this team and Clint gets sort of put up top to lead it. But it's not the team that Clint would have organized himself. And there's all sorts of other factors pushing against them. There's all sorts of public relations stuff they have to deal with. And, you know, being an official superhero team and being part of New York City's budget and all that kind of stuff changes what you can do and how you do it. And that is where all that kind of push and pull comes and where a lot of the drama and the humor come from in the series. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about the lineup, I proposed a certain group of characters and then got notes back. And we sort of went back and forth multiple times figuring out who these characters would be, why they would be on the team. You know, and one of the things that Tom, my editor, said to me early on was, if it's New York superhero team, then the vast majority of these team members should be New York based. Like that's a natural, you know what I mean? And so we looked and we said, oh, cool. Someone like, you know, Victor Alvarez, who's the new Power Man. Well, first of all, he's New York based, which is great. And second of all, Luke Cage doesn't want the name Power Man being wasted. You know, this kid's got potential. All right, let's put him on this team. There's a natural fit. So you've got two kind of easy attachment points there. Someone like, you know, Kara Kilgrave, Purple Girl, well, I guess now called Persuasion. She, you know, was shown living in New York City in the recent Jessica Jones miniseries. So it's like, okay, she's based in New York. She can fit a role there as well. You know, someone like America Chavez in the latest miniseries of hers, I think it was called Made in America. She's also now based in New York City. So it's great. Okay, we're pulling on these threads of existing continuity and kind of attaching them all together to pull, you know, the team and give them a foundation. They are New York based. And, you know, they're being pulled together for public relations reasons and other kinds of things. But that's sort of their attachment point is the geography.
You see, now that actually raises my second question, which is something I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I am a big nerd.
What?
Yes.
In comics? This is crazy.
Yes. Is immigration law going to come into this about... So, for example,
right.
As an example, Persuasion,
Right.
who is a former member of Alpha Flight, a
Oh, I'm
Canadian
very
team.
aware of this. I am Canadian. I know
Yeah,
this
I
stuff.
know,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
So, is there going to be any issues about her work papers? And then, likewise, America Chavez, who isn't even from this universe. Thank you very much.
She's not. It's true.
And then we have Ergo being put in as
Ego,
the baby
the
Yoda of the team.
Unbreakable.
Let's be
That's right.
honest.
Ego, the Unbreakable, who's our new character. I've always wanted to make my own Marvel monster. And it was interesting because I was going through the existing kind of Marvel monster listings, and I was talking to Tom about I wanted to have a monster on the team. I thought it could be a lot of fun. And we were sort of going back and forth on some of the existing ones. And then Tom said, you have this very specific criteria, story-wise and for these other reasons. And he's like, rather than trying to jam one that, into a role, he's like, just make one, Jim. You can make monsters. You can make things in the Marvel universe. And I love making new characters anyways. So that's where Ego, the Unbreakable, came from. He's this really fun character, and getting to do this throwback kind of Kirby style monster who is, not human, and he doesn't look at things in a human way. He doesn't fully understand our language or customs. Like, it's a really corny concept, but one that you can have a lot of fun with as well. And, his introduction in issue 2, I think is pretty priceless. I'm really, really happy with it. And then there's some upcoming stuff that he does in future issues that I think is, going to grab people's attention. So yeah, he's a ton of fun to write. And it's just one of these oddball kind of things that you can do in the Marvel universe that I think, more writers need to embrace the kooky strangeness of what is out there in the Marvel canon. Anyways, asking whether or not Ego has proper, so they are all on contract. We do get into some of the business stuff, although we don't talk as much about immigration or things like that, but we do talk about other elements of their contracts and about, how they have to appear in public, or, their need to do media and press things, whether or not they want to. That's part of their contract as well. There's a bit of an exchange coming up in issue 3 where Hawkeye really wants to wear his old mask, and they're like, no masks because you're a public team. You have to show your face, stuff like that. So we do try and get into some of the fun kind of hurdles of the public facing team, of the team that has to be, a byline on New York City's budget and all kinds of stuff like that. Which is fun. It's fun to think about the permutations of it when you're building these things,
And at the end of issue 1, it seems like you have a mystery. I mean, Charlie, we talked about this one.
There's multiple mysteries. Yeah.
Well, this new character, Guts and Glory, is that his name? Yes.
Yes, Guts and Glory is like a ridiculous kind of character that we put together. This cyber soldier he's a lot of kind of cliches of the 90s sort of jammed together on purpose, including the mystery man kind of element. And, Helen, the PR person for the team, she mentions even there, she goes, our polling says that a mystery character, a character with a mysterious past and a loner will do really well with the public. And so that's sort of this joke and also this meta answer where it's like, as soon as we put that character in there, we were really putting a lampshade on the fact that we've made a big mystery around him. And lo and behold, a whole bunch of readers were like, oh, there's a mystery, and they're super excited. So it's like, kind of life imitates art, imitates life. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, I know you can't answer this, but I had a theory that he was a pre-existing character who we've seen before in a previous Thunderbolts run in disguise.
Yeah, some people have mentioned that to me as well, and I can't say one way or another, and I can't tell you how much or how little will be revealed over the course of this miniseries. So he's a fun character because he does slam up against all kinds of these cliches and stereotypes, and kind of leaning into some of those is a ton of fun because they are fun. They're the kinds of exciting things that there's a reason why some of those characters, like, your Cable or your whatever in the 90s, grab people's attention because they felt cool. They felt interesting and mysterious and something a little bit different. And it feels like we've gone kind of full circle now, 25, 30 years later, you can do it again. And people are like, wait a minute, that's kind of cool. So it's, it knows what it is, and it tips its hat. And when you've got an amazing artist like Sean Isaac, who's, our core artist on the series, he designed the characters up really, really well, the new costumes and the new characters. And he's done an amazing job. he's got a really good balance between great looking action, but he does good character drama as well. He does great character expressions and facial expressions and subtleties in there. And so I love being able to kind of throttle things. We can get pretty subtle in some spots, and we can get kind of emotional, and there's good talking scenes, and then we crank it up for the action as well. And he does both very, very well. So when you've got a collaborator like that, or Netho Diaz, who steps in to help out on issue 3, does a phenomenal job. Same kind of areas, does really, really good character interactions, does really great action. And so, you feel a lot more comfortable when you're writing this stuff, when it's going to come through. One of the difficulties is if you don't know your collaborators when you're writing these scripts, you can write a scene and in your head you think it's going to play out a certain way on the page, and then you get the artwork and you go, oh, this is not what I thought. Okay, we need to sort of pivot. And that's never been a problem when I'm working with Sean. I work with him on multiple projects, and every single time he just hits the ground running with this stuff. We're just we've got a really good kind of, we understand each other's sort of sensibilities in that way.
And I would assume we're going to see more and more of a personal favorite of ours, Monica Rambeau.
Right. So Monica's amazing. She's so good. And, it was such an amazing opportunity when we looked at the character cast, and I realized, oh man, Monica Rambeau had just shown up in WandaVision when we were planning this stuff out, and she didn't currently have a home. And she's one of my favorite characters. When I was growing up reading the Avengers, she was the leader of the Avengers. She's incredibly powerful. She's really, really cool. And, she has been a leader before. And that tension point of Clint has been put into the leadership position, but he wasn't actually Luke's first choice. Monica was. And Monica can see the minefield. She can see what the PR problems are. She can see the visibility and the budget problems. She does not want to step into that gauntlet, but she also feels a deep-seated sense of responsibility to Luke and to people at large. And she wants to do the right thing. And that's a really, it's a fun little tension point to be able to play off of between the two of them. And she simultaneously wants to bring, take Clint to task, but also I think in some ways is almost thankful that he's taking the heat as well,
So, and if you can't go into it too much, but
right.
like, why did Monica say no when Luke comes to her? Because Luke comes to her first,
right?
And she's like, no. But then,
and she says it. She says it explicitly in the Devil's Reign Omega. She says, "I don't want to do the media circus. I don't want to deal with the public. I don't want to be answerable to like a bunch of politicians and PR people." And she says flat out, she's like, there's a stereotype of the angry Black woman that if she does something wrong or something that people don't like, they're just going to pillar her, that they're going to treat her like crap in a way that they wouldn't, with someone like Clint. And that's the truth in media, and it's the truth in the press. And so she just sort of calls it right out, puts a button on it and says, Luke, you are, this isn't just a team. This is like a PR experiment and all these other things. It's intimately tied into his political well-being that the Thunderbolts do well. And she does not want that hanging over her. And yet she can't, completely let go or watch it fail. Do you know what I mean? And so she kind of feels this sense of guilt and this sense of responsibility. So she was hovering around in that first issue, realized things were going to fall apart, swooped in and saved the day. And now she's sort of locked into it and doesn't know how to extricate herself from the problem.
Is that going, and I understand if you can't say,
sure,
but is that tension between her and Clint? Because we know Clint is a guy that can have a short temper.
What?
No.
Yes.
No.
But is that going to come into a play?
Of course it is. That's why we write these dramatic stories. That's why we set these things into play, right? So issue 3 already, you're going to see some of that start to really bubble over, and you're going to see that need for both of them to want to try and take charge of a situation or to feel like their experience level and knowledge is going to define where the team should go and why. And that's, one of the things that was really exciting to me is to write the inner character drama. One of the reasons why I love writing team books. I've written almost exclusively team books at Marvel because I love the interplay between characters. I love being able to, raise a character up and put them in the spotlight momentarily and then sort of de-emphasize them and bring someone else into the forefront. The relationships, the romance, the action, the arguments. Those are the things that I find really interesting and fascinating, putting characters into unexpected situations and tuning them up and seeing how it all goes. And it's something I really enjoy. And thankfully, Marvel recognizes that it's something that I do well and that they want to encourage. So wherever possible, it seems like I get drafted into these team books in a good way, so it's been a blast. Yeah.
So you said this is so this one's only 5. So
yes.
Has there been any talks of more, or do we got to go out and?
There's been chatter. I would love to do more, and there's some plot threads that we pay off, and then there's some other stuff that we leave a little more ambiguous at the end of those 5. And I'm always trying to seed the future. If you look at things like when Mark Waid, Al Ewing, and I did something like No Surrender, that became like a kind of a tether for a bunch of other plot lines and things that happened to those characters heading out of it. Something like the Immortal Hulk started in that spot and then sort of springs out of there in another direction, right? Or you look at something like Conan showing up in the Marvel universe from No Road Home, and a bunch of other series and plot lines that kind of sprung out of that as well. And so I love being able to kind of, I don't know, fertilize the ground of some potential future plot lines, and hopefully I or someone else pays them off in fun and unexpected ways. And so you're always trying to kind of set yourself up for the future, and you're also trying to tee up other people to do fun stuff. Like I did one of the miniseries out of that Empire book. At the end of the Empire Avengers, we gave Kazar a bunch of kind of power, like the spirit of the Savage Land was sort of moved through him, and then someone else goes and does a Kazar series, following up on that, and what are the permutations of it, right? So sometimes you're the one that's going to carry the baton to the next goal, and other times it's for someone else to. That's the nature of these shared universes. And the more things you build and the more cool pieces you put into play, the more chances that those things grow and evolve in fun and unexpected ways. So yeah.
Okay.
So I know you were saying some of the stuff might get paid off, some not.
Well, no, the big plot does. Like the major.
Yeah.
So at the end of issue 1, there's something funky going on with Hawkeye looking in the mirror and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That, for lack of a better term, is a through line thread that will definitely get paid off. A couple of the things that you think are floating on the edges all tie together to
Okay.
those payoffs that are yet to come. We definitely made this 5 issues so that you get a satisfying chunk of story, and you come away with, hey, this is a cool adventure. This is the team, and this is what they were all about, and this is why they did what they did. But it's the Marvel universe, so you always want to also have little subplots and little evolutions that you can then use later on. It's not, I don't want to make it feel like you're going to read this and be like, what the hell, it's half a story, because that's not my intent. Yeah.
So you can plead the 5th on this.
Sure.
But have you pitched
Whoa.
issue 6 to the powers that be yet?
Right.
And if you have, can you let us know your thoughts on issue 6?
I would plead the 5th in that particular situation. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So what's all with this Murder World?
So Murderworld is one of the most unlikely projects I've ever had the chance to work on, let alone at the big 2. It is a very weird kind of evolution of this project. My original proposal for Murderworld, I joke around, but it's true. This the pitch for Murderworld is old enough to vote. Before I had any Marvel credits, almost before I had any writing credits whatsoever, my good friend, Ray Fox, and I, we met each other when I was in university, and we were both aspiring writers and aspiring creatives. And we had been talking about all sorts of things, and we would read tons of comics, and we would, brainstorm stuff. And we had been talking about, different cool things that would be, neat to work on. A few years later, I was working at a studio called Udon, and the Udon studio was doing actually quite a bit of work at Marvel. They were doing the Deadpool series when Gail Simone was writing it. They were doing a book called Sentinel. They eventually, when Deadpool evolved into Agent X, they were doing that book and a couple other things as well. I think they were coloring X-Men, like all sorts of different stuff. And so I was working at the Udon studio doing other artwork and other kind of development work outside of comics. But I was an aspiring writer. I really wanted to do stuff. And all of a sudden we had, as close as I could have ever imagined at that point, a through line to Marvel. And so Ray and I came up with this idea for Murderworld, basically evolving Arcade's, death contest, updating it, modernizing it, and putting a few new twists into it, and how that would work. And we managed to pitch this thing to Joe Quesada, and the response back essentially was, "Yeah, this is kind of cool. Who the hell are these guys? Like these guys don't have any writing credits. They don't have any Marvel credits. They don't have anything. Like, this is neat and all, but you're not going to, your first comic writing credit is not going to be a Marvel book. That's not how this stuff works. Go get some experience or whatever, keep your powder dry." And so the proposal got thrown into a drawer, and I didn't really worry about it. Years go by, my career evolves. Eventually I'm doing all sorts of different stuff. I'm doing work for Image. I'm doing work for IDW and Dynamite and, Dark Horse, and finally doing work over at DC and Marvel. But when I started working at Marvel, they had just a couple years earlier done that series called Avengers Arena. And that was like a Murderworld kind of thing. And I was like, well, they've used Arcade recently. They're not going to want to do this thing anyways. So I just sort of kept it in a drawer, and I didn't really worry about it. As I was developing Thunderbolts, I was talking to Marvel editors in general. I was talking to CB Cebulski, and my pitch for Thunderbolts was very much this kind of like Clint Barton, almost as Ted Lasso. Like, he's not the right guy for the job, but he's got to become the right guy for the job. And we're going to have a lot of heart. We're going to have a little bit of humor. It's going to be a lot of fun in the Mighty Marvel manner. And CB really liked that pitch, and we had a lot of great conversations out of it. And he says, well, if you've got another rock solid pitch like that ever, let me know. And I was like, cool, I will. And he goes, if you got a Squid Game in your back pocket. And I said, oh, Marvel's got a Squid Game. And he goes, oh, do we? And he goes, yeah, man. I said, it's Murderworld. And he goes, sure, it's Murderworld, but what's the actual hook? Like, what's the story? And I said, I actually have the hook. I have the story. And so I went into my archives. I dug out the proposal. Thank God I'm a much better writer now anyways. Went through, gave it a revision, and found some new, really cool permutations. But the core idea was still pretty solid, and turned around that pitch and sent it to him. And within a couple of weeks, we were on the board. All of a sudden, I was pitching it to an actual line editor, and we were a go. And then I contacted my buddy Ray, who in the meantime has also built his own writing career, did a ton of stuff over at DC. He did Constantine for a while. He did Batman Eternal. He did all kinds of different stuff. So now we're the guys that could actually execute on this thing. We're the guys that could actually deliver. And it's no longer, who are these people? It's those guys. And so when we pitch the story, suddenly it's happening. And I get to call him up out of the blue and go, hey, Ray, I got a weird one for you. We're going to co-write Murderworld. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, man, it's back and we're doing this. And he said, you could have done it solo. Like, I wouldn't have minded. It's been so damn long. And I said, no, we pitched it as a team. We're doing it as a team. That's my, that's my loyalty to you. And I feel really good about it. And so we've never worked together before. It's been an absolute blast. We've been working on this series, and it's now the format of it and the way it's being delivered. It's a series of these 5 one-shots that are all building together to this big, crazy story that's going to redefine and propel Murderworld into the future. And not like the literal future, not like sci-fi future, but like setting it up in the current Marvel universe in a different manner, and upping the stakes and making things. I think Arcade's an amazing character, and I think Murderworld has always been so fun because it's so colorful. But one of the only downsides is because you're constantly putting these high-profile heroes into it. Spider-Man's not going to die in Murderworld. Whatever. Yeah. The X-Men are not going to die in Murderworld. And so all we've seen is Arcade be a loser. For years and years and years, we've seen Arcade be a loser. He always loses. Every single time he has to lose. And so we posited like, okay, the winning is coming and we're going to do it. We're going to make him genuinely lethal. We're going to make the place genuinely scary. And we're going to build a bigger scope for it in its potential. And that's what I'm really excited about. I don't want to reveal anything past that because the first issue's got twists aplenty. And I think people are getting their own idea of what they think it's going to be. And I'm a little nervous because everyone's going to go into it with their own expectations. And then they're going to read that first issue and then see what it really is. And then that'll kind of transform, I think, a lot of the discourse around it, and then be like, okay, now we see what it is. Where's that going to go? Now you can start making your bets on what you think the twists and turns are going to be. Because right now you don't, and by design, we don't want you to know. We're keeping a lot of it close to our chest. So, yeah.
I have I already have a theory. Oh man, I'm thinking either D-list heroes or brand new heroes, and it's just like, oh hey, 5 issues.
Right.
You're not going to get there's not going to be a survivor every time. So yeah, you're going to have to.
There is some lethality. I will tell you that there's some solid lethality here, and we're pushing the bounds of what we can do in a Marvel book, like violence wise. And yeah, almost every issue we're having great conversations with our editor where she's sort of figuring out, standards and practice is reading over every issue with a fine-tooth comb and going, here is how far you can go. Here's what we can infer. Here's what has to be off panel. But readers will know exactly what we've just done and how kind of gruesome or crazy we're going to get with it. So I'm really, really happy with how it's evolving. And I know it's good when I send my, latest script in and the notes we get back are like, oh my God, I'm going to have to figure out if we can get away with this. And it's like, good. I want to push it as far as we can towards that line and let's see where that is, because we're going for it. And that's what I'm really excited about. And so the first 2 have been announced. It's Murderworld Avengers is the first one. And the second one is Murderworld Spider-Man. And both of them they're wild. They're really fun stuff. Yeah. So,
yeah. I mean, not for nothing. One of my favorite ideas that you see in comics is the idea of the real made aggrandized, and
right.
the aggrandized made real, which is, again, we're getting to this idea about immigration law. And
right.
This idea
and the great thing about even the classic, Stan Lee would say that Marvel Universe was the world outside your window. And so they would take real world topics or real world things and they would exaggerate them and stretch them and put them into new context, right? That's the whole point of the thing. So, our obsession with, like, you see, why did something like Squid Game, or why does something like, why do we obsess over these kinds of contests? Why do we obsess over these, risks that people take and the types of things that they do? What is that we're into? Why, whatever, gladiatorial combat, this kind of stuff. Why do we want to see a fight break out at a hockey game? We don't just want to watch hockey. We want to see when it boils over. Right. And so these are the kinds of things that I think, particularly with kind of social media and sometimes playing to our basest instincts, that we can kind of lean into, and this is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. There have been sci-fi stories about this kind of stuff, killer contests and death games and things like that forever. I think it's come back in vogue because we all feel very powerless, because we all feel like the world is sort of churning away beneath our feet. And if someone offered you a crazy chance to win it all or lose it all, would you play? Would anyone play?
Exactly.
And if not you, let's watch someone else, vicariously take those risks. Yeah.
My mind goes back to the most dangerous game.
Right.
And the idea that if you could play the most dangerous game, do you want to be the hunter or the hunted?
Right.
And there's the part of you that wants to be, not to get political or whatever, but I could imagine a Thomas Edison character, let's say.
Right.
He's in the public domain, saying, no, I'll be the guy who will build my own armor, and I'll be the guy who fights back, because that's the real enjoyment.
Well, but the thing is that, what I think what's really fun about it is when you create these scenarios where it's a game, but there are rules. And of course, the risk and reward is life or death, or, severe maiming at the very, kind of low end of the injury scale. And we're cranking those things up. I think there's there's an instant bit of drama that you're sort of eking out of the stuff. And the fact is that, Arcade is going to tilt the field in his advantage, and he's going to constantly keep you on your toes. And it's something that I think is really fun for us as writers as well, because we're trying to both pay homage to the murder world of the past. That stuff has all happened, but also not just redo the same kind of things over and over again that have been done before. So how do we keep readers, kind of guessing what sort of things we're going to do, how we're going to, put these people up against it, and things like that. And then also tying into, not to give too much away, some of Arcade's recent appearances and some of the things that he's done over the past few years that haven't really been kind of played out to their finish line. And so we're sort of bringing a bunch of different things together in a really fun kind of package. It's been a real hoot to put together. And I like co-writing, and I've done a bunch of it, but Ray and I have never jammed before like this, and he's got a good devious mind. And I think the one-upmanship, where we're definitely trying to kind of outdo each other in the right kind of way, where it's like, okay, that's bad, we can make it worse. Oh, we can make it deadlier. We can make it crazier. We can sort of twist the thumb screws that much more on these characters and surprise people. And that's something that I'm really kind of looking forward to, readers coming along the ride with us and then seeing how it all plays out. So yeah, there's 5 one-shots, and that starts in November. So that'll take us through November, December, January, February, March into next year. So, and if it does really well, I would certainly be more than happy to prep whatever Murderworld season 2 or whatever we want to call it. If people really, key into what we're doing and why. So,
there he goes. Like, you said Murderworld season 2, because you said Squid Game, and I'm sure everyone's thinking, death traps and stuff. And I'm just thinking, I just got a picture of like Aunt May sitting there watching this whole thing. Like, something.
There is a public facing component of the new Murderworld where people can watch, and that is not something that has happened in the past, right? It's always been a private system. Arcade's he's got a new MO, let's put it that way. So yeah, it's pretty fun stuff.
Well, he did try to build that toy store in Fantastic Four.
Yes. Yeah. I literally reread every single Arcade appearance leading up to this thing. I'm always a bit of a research junkie. So when I'm using characters, I don't always read every appearance, because some of these characters, obviously hundreds and hundreds, but I'll dig in pretty deep. Like, and continuity is something that I really enjoy. Like earlier this year, I wrote the Life of Wolverine Marvel Unlimited digital series, which was essentially kind of re-establishing the timeline of Wolverine's origin and how it kind of functions in a modern sense. And that was literally reading hundreds and hundreds of Wolverine issues and appearances and trying to thread certain patterns that I noticed about the character and saying, okay, these are the broad big moments, here are the milestones, and here's how we bridge those narratively so that a new reader can jump on, or a longtime reader can feel like, yes, this is the steady, constant of the character and how he functions. So I love that stuff. I love, the Marvel universe as a constantly growing and changing thing, and that it has this history to it, and I love being able to give those nods to the past, but not feel so beholden to it that you're trapped, that continuity should be a way to build stories, not a way to trap people into, like a straitjacket of no creativity. You can only do what has been done before,
I mean, it's not necessary, but I love people who work with the history, like even Thunderbolts #1 as guys kicking U.S. agent in the face, mentioning their fight from Avengers West Coast 69.
Yeah. So, that was actually, believe it or not, that was a special request. So, Sean Isaac's a good friend of mine, and we've worked together on a bunch of different projects. He was my first choice for artist on the series, and he was coming off of Fantastic Four, and he literally said he didn't want to do another team book. But I also know Hawkeye is one of his absolute favorite characters in Marvel, so I kind of loaded the deck. I asked Tom to ask him, and he said, hey, we're doing new Thunderbolts. Do you want to do it? And Sean said, no. And I said, did you tell him it's Hawkeye? He said, no, I just told him it's a team book. And I'm like, okay, hold on. A day later, I called Sean and I said, I'm doing Hawkeye and, this team. I didn't even tell him who the other members were. And he was just like, okay, cool. And I said, it's Thunderbolts. He goes, oh, it's that Thunderbolts thing that Tom was talking about. Yeah. And he's like, damn it, it's it's Clint. I'm like, yeah. And he said, wait. I said, look, the first issue is going to be the new Thunderbolts against the old Thunderbolts. And I told him who was on the Kingpin's Thunderbolts. And he goes, John Walker. I was like, yeah. And he goes, he's got to kick John Walker's ass. I was like, you got it, man. I am writing that scene for you just as long as you draw that issue. And he's like, done. And so literally that scene is how I got Sean to commit to doing the book, was making sure that Clint put the boots to John Walker. That was a really fun scene to do too. Actually, Sean was so excited about doing that scene. If you look at West Coast Avengers 69, that fight, and you look at the pages in Thunderbolts #1, they actually have the same layout. They don't just, it's not just, they literally have the same panel breakdown as the original one, except Clint is the one running the show this time. So like Sean went deep. He went deep on that. He really wanted to deliver the goods, and he did a wonderful job. So
I know what rabbit hole I'm going down this weekend.
Right? It's so fun. I love those deep cuts. I love doing those things. It's so funny too, because people would say to me, they were tweeting at me and they go, oh, Jim made a bunch of new characters for the Thunderbolts. And it's like, yeah, I made Guts and Glory and we made Egro. And they're like, no. And the Purple Girl's daughter. I'm like, dude, she's been around since the 80s. Get with it. Come on. Yeah. Purple Girl is old school. She's, Canadian special. So yes. yeah, I know all that stuff.
No, but I one thing I do want to say is I just hope, because, and I know you've read it because you've read all of these books, but it's like when you read John Walker in his first introduction facing the Thunderbolts, he's like, no, man, me and Hawkeye were best friends.
Yep.
And just that complete obliviousness on John Walker's part. It's like, I am sure even now, if they ever bring John Walker back, like, no, man, I understand completely. We're best friends. I'm your biggest fan.
I do. Yeah, the whole sequence is so much fun. I like writing characters who are at odds in those kinds of ways. Even now, like in the issue when Clint doesn't fully realize how much Monica is kind of watching him screw up. Like in issue 2 there, where they're toasting beers at the end of the issue, and he's sort of like, so if you're not here for the contract, you're not here for the, why are you here? And she's like, I'm here to pick things up when you screw up. And he's like, haha, cool. No, seriously, and like that's the character is just a little oblivious, just a little unaware of someone spitting truth at them. I think there's something really fun in that. There's the way each character, their outlook on the world and all those kinds of things. Yeah, I would love to write more John. He's great. And he's the character has been through the fire so many times and been hard done by, but there's some characters you also do kind of enjoy no matter what, kind of getting their druthers.
John Walker is one of those characters who, because he's been through the fire so many times, has like found a place in my heart. It's like,
oh no, totally.
He's the kind of guy who's like, you know what? I am like bound with a symbiote who rebuilt my leg, and I am living this.
Look, there's no purer Marvel character than a character that gets back up after they've been kicked down, right? Like that is every Marvel character has feet of clay. The more flaws they have, the more messed up they are, I think the more we love them. Let's be honest. Like that's what made the Marvel superheroes stand out compared to the DC characters when they were first introduced, and it's kept going. It's the characters' flaws that define them even more than their positive traits. I think that's been a constant in the Marvel universe. And so when you peel back the onion and you see the characters that they are underneath, and they're vulnerable and they're difficult and they're struggling, we see ourselves in the Marvel universe, right? And so writing a group of characters that are as screwed up as these Thunderbolts it's a real pure Marvel experience for me, like honestly. And when I'm writing it, I do try and harken back to the kinds of writers like Chris Claremont or Roger Stern or some of these other guys who they were making those kinds of flawed amazing characters that I love to read about. And when they would screw up, you're like, oh my God, why can't they get it right? Why are they such a friggin' mess? But you got to keep reading, because it's not the simple answers that make a good story,
And that is why Hawkeye is a character who carries on.
Right? I think Clint's an amazing character. John like Rosenberg wrote Free Fall and just put Clint under the wheels, man. That was great. And every issue, I'm just like, oh my God, it's getting worse. Oh my God, this is great. Like just mash them into the dirt, because then we see what they're all about. You know, when I wrote the Champions, I think a lot of our readers were surprised because I really put the characters like through hell. Like I put them through a lot of difficult scenarios, and people were like, why are you being so mean to these kids? And I was like, because I grew up reading Teen Titans and New Mutants. That's why. Because that was what Marv and you know, Claremont would have done. They would have just mashed these guys in a mush. And so it's my duty as a superhero writer to just you know, run them over. Dramatically speaking, you know, that's why.
And
I do it.
speaking of running over characters, dramatically speaking, let's talk Rick and Morty.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Sure.
right out of time.
Right. So yeah, it's been a real blast. Like 3 years ago, I did Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons. So I've been writing the official Dungeons and Dragons comic since 2014. For all your tabletop gamer listeners, that was when 5th edition D&D launched, and no one knew if it was going to do very well. And now Dungeons and Dragons is bigger than it has ever been, ever. It's a huge pop culture footprint right now. And I've kind of held on as the rocket ride's been going. I've been writing D&D stuff ever since. And so IDW and Oni Press were at a convention chatting about the possibilities of working together on a project. Someone at that dinner said Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons, and everyone laughed, and then they couldn't get it out of their heads. They asked me if I would work on this thing. And so Pat Rothfuss and I co-wrote this miniseries. Troy Little illustrated the hell out of it. We had a ton of fun. It was an absolute blast. Pat is like, you know, depending on, he's basically the next George R.R. Martin. He's this really in-demand fantasy author. He's, you know, New York Times bestselling author and all this kind of stuff. So he didn't have the bandwidth to do more, but I was super pumped and I had more ideas. I threw it past him. He said, look, man, with my blessing, keep going. So I did a sequel to Rick and Morty versus D&D, and Troy and I have become closer and closer working on these projects. He's an incredible artist. He's an amazing writer in his own right. I'm amazed that he, you know, is drawing my scripts, because he should just be doing his own stuff. But we're a really amazing team. We have so much fun working on these books, and we did the 2, you know, D&D books together. And then I just kind of was rolling around in my head, it would be fun to do, kind of take a left turn and do something different. And this concept of Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu kind of wedged into my brain. And I sent the editor at Oni Press, at the time, Sarah Gatos, just an email that literally said, I think the title of the email was, got an idea for you. And it just said Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu. And the email back was, let's get on the phone. I was like, great. So we had an amazing conversation. I put it up into a formal proposal, and we were off and running. And then I kind of flexed and said, I don't want to do it unless Troy's drawing it, because he's the only guy I think that could, you know, carry it out, because we're going for broke and it's just going to be the craziest damn story that you can imagine. And Troy thankfully read the pitch, and he said, you know, don't let anyone else do it. And so we've been cranking away on this thing ever since. And it is one of the most insane things I've written. Like it is, I've been digging back into all the, you know, Howard Philip Lovecraft stories, all the Cthulhu mythos kind of stuff. We're doing weird deep cuts. If you know the Cthulhu stuff, you will be shocked at some of the threads that we're pulling on. If you don't know any of it, it's no problem. You're still going to have an absolute friggin' blast, because the Smith family, like, you know, Summer and Beth and Morty, they don't know any of the Cthulhu stuff. So Rick constantly has to explain it to them while they're on this adventure and all the messed up things that they're going through. So you're getting his kind of twisted take on what all this crap is. And, you know, his deep kind of criticism of Lovecraft as a person, as a xenophobic, paranoid racist, and, you know, plus all the weird
and technophobe
ultimate, you know, nihilism that it kind of, you know, purports, but also the crazy kind of visuals and the amazing stories. So many kind of horror cliches that have built off of those Lovecraft stories. And it's fun because when you go back to the source, now it seems really hokey, but that's where it came from. The cliche came from this thing. And so they're calling it out and saying, like, Morty's like, this isn't scary. And, you know, Rick is basically like, look, you kids live on the internet. You know, if you were in the 1920s, this would have scared the shit out of you. You know what I mean? Like, so stuff like that, you know, that's there's a lot of fun that we've been having with that element of it as well. And then because they actually go to dimensions where these stories are real, Troy is also kind of tuning up his style. So when they're in the Rick and Morty world, he draws it very much in the animation style. But as they enter, Arkham and all these kinds of places, he's tuning it up. So he's like dropping these really black, moody shadows and like exaggerating the characters more. And so I think Troy's been able to get a lot more creative with the book in that artistic way. And that's just, kind of amping me up to want to do crazier and crazier stuff. And if we're being 100% honest, because it's cartoony and animated style, we can be way, way gorier than we would with a realistic looking book. So there's stuff in this book that we get away with thanks to the power of cartooniness that we would never ever be able to get away with on a realistically themed book. Like, it is nuts, and we're having an absolute ball. And then in classic kind of Rick and Morty fare, we're doing big pop culture criticism, we're doing some philosophy, we're doing some surprising kind of character emotional moments that are going to kind of throw you a curveball, and it all wraps up in this very kind of metaphysical way, worthy, hopefully, of the works of Lovecraft and his his mythos. So I am super, super pumped for people to read it. Like I was saying before, I'm putting the finishing touches on the final script this week, and it's been living in my head for ages. The outline's been there, and now finally actually, digging through those scenes and getting them on paper has been a joy. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read it. It's on my pull list.
Sweet, man.
My kid has been waiting to see Rick and Morty vs. Cthulhu since they had Cthulhu in the original.
Right. And so, and that was one of those things where when we started talking about, we're like, okay, how are we going to, utilize that moment, or how are we playing into that visual? And again, I don't want it to be something that readers are going to anticipate. And that's all I can say on that front. It's going to be, it is a ton of fun. And in the back of, what I was able to convince him as well is in the back of each issue, we're going to have sort of back matter. You're going to see a lot of Troy's design sketches because he's been doing amazing sketches. I will send him excerpts from the Lovecraft stories. Like, this is how a character is described, or this is how a monster is described. And in many cases, Lovecraft is not being specific about visuals. He's describing textures and atmosphere and things like that. So I didn't want Troy to copy what other artists have done and just become a poor man's version of it. I wanted him sort of purely like, if you got this text, what are you imagining? What do you see? You know what I mean? And then the other thing was, I've also describing all the Lovecraft stories that we're riffing on. So if you've never read that stuff before, you'll be like, holy crap, they reference 5 different Lovecraft stories in 22 pages. Like, how the hell do they do that? And it's like, well, because this one crosses over here, and this is a deep cut of this moment there, and this is a secondary character from there who shows up unexpectedly. Basically, once, without trying to give away too much, once Rick and Morty and the family go into these other dimensions, the stories as they go, the normal narratives start to splinter. They don't have to follow their normal narrative path, because it's like dropping a pebble in the pond. The ripples start to go further and further out. Once Rick changes something, well, now that didn't happen, that means this other thing doesn't happen, which means the whole thing starts to kind of unravel. And so characters who never, met each other in the original mythos stories are now suddenly slamming right up against each other thanks to our idiot family, So yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun to dig back into that stuff in a big way.
And if anyone has any questions to ask you about anything we talked tonight, you said you're going to be at New York Comic Con next week.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to be in Artist Alley. I'm with the Comic Sketch Art crew, and so I will be there Thursday through Saturday. I'm leaving on Sunday morning. It's Canadian Thanksgiving, and I want to spend that with my family. So I'm jetting before the show starts on Sunday morning. But I'll be there Thursday through Saturday at table J28. And it's going to be awesome. Really, really excited to see friends, really excited to see fans, and get back to New York for the first time in over 2 years. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be great. But all right, before I let you do your plugs, can you do me one quick favor? Can I get a quick stinger of you saying, hi, this is Jim Zub, and you are listening to the Capes and Lunatics podcast?
Absolutely. My pleasure. Here we go. Hi, I'm Jim Zub, the writer of Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu, and this is the Capes and Lunatics podcast.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Sweet. No problem.
I don't know what happened to Charlie, but yeah, okay. So yeah, before we go, if
Sure.
you want to hit everyone with the plugs again,
No worries.
Thunderbolts, Rick and Morty, Murderworld.
I've got a bunch of stuff on the go right now, lots of different projects underway. So if you want to read what I'm up to, here's what's coming in the months ahead. Thunderbolts is currently being published by Marvel, and it's going to be running through this fall. Make sure that you dive on to that series. It has been a ton of fun. We've also got Murderworld, a series of 5 one-shots that are going to lead a mysterious and murderous game of death through the Marvel Universe that I think people will be surprised and amazed by. I'm also doing a miniseries at Dynamite for the Unbreakable Red Sonja. The character in 2023 is celebrating her 50th anniversary, and I get to kind of do the opening salvo, a big story all about kind of her past, her present, and potentially her future. It has been an absolute joy to work away on that as well. I've got Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu that is launching in December at Oni Press. And the Skull Kickers, which was my kind of original action comedy sword and sorcery series that really propelled my career to a whole other level. We celebrated 10 years during the pandemic, and we put together a brand new story, and Image is publishing that. That will be coming out as a one-shot special, 36-page brand new story called The Skull Kickers Super Special, in the in the manner of the like New Mutants and X-Men super specials back in the day. So it's a brand new story. Even if you've never read any Skull Kickers before, you can dive right in and enjoy this one. It's a complete adventure from start to finish. And we're riffing on the idea of kind of Harry Potter and magic schools and all that sort of stuff as our mercenary monster mashers cause havoc and upend anything that you think you know about fantasy. So other than that, nothing. Pretty bored.
So you heard it here first, kids. This man doesn't sleep.
It's been good. It's been good. Lots of cool projects on the go, keeping me out of trouble, and a lot more fun stuff to come in the new year as well. So can't wait for some more upcoming announcements. So,
oh yeah, I mean, we always enjoy your stuff, but yes,
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Jim Zub. Thank you for giving us your time.
I really appreciate it. If you want to find out more, just go to jimzub.com. On there, you'll find links to all my books, interviews, and a bunch of different resources for how to write comics. So I've got a lot of free articles about how comics are written, how pitches are put together, how to work with artists and editors, and the whole 10 yards.
Which are really enjoyable to read, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was something that I didn't see very much
really
of.
Love those.
Thank you. It was something that I hadn't seen a lot of in terms of resources when I was starting out, and a lot of questions that I had asked that I didn't find the answers to until a lot later. And so now those are out there. And whenever I do a convention, there's always quite a few people who come over to my table, and they're telling me how helpful those have been to their own kind of creative journeys, or in some cases, they're bringing me the books that they've made. And that is probably the most it really means a lot to me to see people making stuff and being creative and putting their ideas out there and making their mark in comics. So the more new creators we've got in the business, the more creativity we see out there, the bigger and better it'll be for all of us. Sweet. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. No, I do read those and I do love them. So not that I've ever actually been able to utilize them, but I do love to read.
Well, but a lot of people I think find the peek behind the curtain interesting, regardless of whether or not you're actively using it. Sometimes you're like, why don't you guys do this? And you're like, oh, it's for these reasons. Or, when you get invited to a convention, what does that entail? Like, what do they cover and what do you pay for and how does that stuff work? And I'm just, pretty open and honest about how it all sort of functions. And thankfully, other people have been able to avoid some of the pitfalls that I've had, but also, get a bit of a leg up in terms of the knowledge that they need to build their own stuff. So, yeah, it's been fun.
And if you have the time, please come back when Murderworld comes out. We can talk some Murderworld.
Yes, once we've got a couple issues in the can, and then you can talk specifics. You'll be like, okay, now I see what you're going for. And then the question is going to be, with this terrible thing here, was that you or was that Ray? And if he's not on the interview, then I can just say it's all his fault and it'll be great. So
Plausible
So how many
ideas.
issues is Murderworld?
It's 5.
One
there's
a
5.
month.
5.
Yeah, because he said
So maybe around
November.
issue 3, we should all get together again.
Yeah, then you'll be in really good mode to start making bets on who lives, who dies, and where it's all going. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I think you said November through March, because like one a month. Yeah,
it's going to be good. And we're all done. Like we're not all done. We're sort of working on the last one now. So it's like we know how it all plays out, but it's just that last little bit of tuning as we put that last issue to bed. So it's exciting to see it coming together. That's the thing about doing these projects and collaborating with so many amazing people. The editors, Sarah Brunstad is our editor on Murderworld, and she's been so incredibly supportive. When you've got great people that you're working with and that they're at every turn trying to help you raise it up to the next level and giving you that feedback that you need to kind of temper it, then that's where you want to be. And so that's what I really love doing about these projects, is working with great artists, working with great editors, and making stuff we can all be proud of. Yeah, sweet.
All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, sir. We'll let you get back to the 6 projects you're working on at once.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciated time. And yes, we will have you back for Murderworld if you are so inclined. So
awesome. Keep reading, and I really appreciate the support.
Thank you, sir. All right. So always a great interview.
We'll see him either in January or February.
Yeah. Because I think
I will be ready for that. We go request my Murderworlds now. I didn't want to get too deep into it, but man, I'm really hoping for, like I said, I want to see a couple of Tony Stark wannabes totally getting ground up in that, because they paid for the experience.
Couple the unlimited class wrestler dropouts.
Well, they wouldn't volunteer. You'd see them in the hench. This has always been my pitch. Was superhero fantasy camp. We get a bunch of B-list superheroes and a bunch of B-list supervillains, and you get a bunch of guys that just paying their money, and they're going to get to play with some vibranium wackadoos for an hour. It's like, oh no, man! So here's how you want to hit, and here's how you want to do the parry, and just a bunch of working class hench just doing their job. I've always thought that Arcade would be a good guy to run it, but obviously he's doing bigger things.
I know. I was going to tell him. I was like, it's not necessary in these stories, but like I just love that's extra for me when they reference something from like 20 or 30 years ago. It's like, oh hey, remember this guy hasn't shown up since the 90s? Yeah, we're gonna kill him in Murderworld or something.
Yeah, well, no, but that's the guy who like just winds up surviving.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Just the guy who just because that's the thing. Not for nothing, they used to introduce omnipotent beings all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Who just then went about their life. It's like you could bring Dan Germain into any story and just have him completely own everyone. Because he's freaking Dan Germain, and he is just a guy who wants to go home and see his kids and don't get in the midst of that. To me, Dan Germain is one of the most interesting characters the Marvel Universe has ever created. Just because his actual superpowers really are a curse. Because unlike going from being a billionaire super scientist or even a highly regarded super scientist, he's just a dude who fell in a vat because there's no OSHA in Marvel. And, and he got these superpowers, which are great, except for the fact that it makes it really hard for him in his daily life because he has a wife and kids and he lives in a small suburb and he doesn't want to be a superhero. He just has amazing superpowers that, if he's not careful, could hurt people he loves. And that's the real threat that no one ever really addresses. Dan Germain. God bless you.
All right. Should we wrap this up?
We can wrap this up. We got another show to talk about. We'll talk about I guess we'll talk indie comics and when Lilith gets back.
I was going to say next week, the return of Lilith Hellfire. That's right. And I was talking to her. Hey, I think it drops on next Friday. So hopefully we should be able to do it day of. Do you want to do that? I believe the Werewolf by Night special drops next Friday. It's only like an hour, or maybe not even an hour.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I do. Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Or even if we got to push back a day, if we got to push back a day or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll work it out. I'll find a way. I always do.
Like I said, I think it's under an hour, so it's not even like it's not like a full length movie or anything.
Yeah, but if I have to take a PTO, it's doing this stuff beforehand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Not all of us get to read comics at work, Phil.
I don't read comics at work.
I know. I'm just saying.
But yeah, if we got to do it Saturday, we'll do
Not all of us read comics quickly, Phil.
All right. So yes, send us your thoughts. Yes, the Lilith Hellfire returns next week, peasants. So send us your thoughts. Email us, CapesandLunatics@gmail.com, or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. Hey, if you're a creator, please contact us for an interview. And remember, you can follow Capes and Lunatics on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Find links to all the various social medias, and follow us on our YouTube channels. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss anything, including these lovely interviews.
Smash it.
And of course, please subscribe to the Patreon. Once again, we're paying for this ourselves. Every little bit helps, but $3 to $5 gets you early access to all these creator interviews, including the monthly Chichester chats.
I got the good mic out for you guys.
And superhero movie brackets. We will find the worst superhero movie of all time. The end of the year is coming up. So yes, subscribe now. Listen to all the previous episodes, and you can be there when we crown the winner. And of course, you can also pick up some Capes and Lunatics. Show your love. Pick up Capes and Lunatics and Capes and Lunatics Sidekicks merch. Find it all at Linktree, linktr.ee/Capes and Lunatics. All right, Mr. Charlie Esser, where can people talk to you about Rick and Morty?
Well, they can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our mothers and fathers once did. At superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And follow me on the Twitter as I live tweet things when they're new, and I can, unlike Stargirl this week, but maybe next week when I might be recording at the same time, and therefore can't, at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality.
Bing.
Thank you, Maz.
Yeah, that confused me. I was like, why isn't Stargirl recording? And I was like, oh yeah, it's a repeat.
Yeah. Sadly. Although it was a good episode, and I did live tweet that episode when it came out. So there we go. Just scroll up.
All right, kids. Thank you. Once again, thank you to Mr. Jim Zub. Go see him at New York Comic Con next week. And we will be back next week. But until then, we have been your Capes.
Ampersand.
Lunatics.
See, the question I really wanted to ask Jim, but I didn't want to ask him because I was afraid he might already have something like that. And it's like, if you're going to have Cults of Cthulhu, there should be a Cult of Cthulhu that just wants him to stay asleep and just sings lullabies to him all the time. It's like, go to sleep, little Cthulhu. Don't worry about that.
I wouldn't put it past him. That might be in the story. So
that's the thing. That's why I didn't want to say it. Because I was like,
yeah,
he's a smart guy. He might have already thought of that. That there's probably gonna be a lot of people like, no, we actually don't want Cthulhu to awaken.
He would just be like, I can't talk about that.
Exactly. I know, but I don't want to put him on the spot.